Hello there. Today I'm going to talk about guitar playing in a way and how it relates to language learning because, as you may know, I spend a lot of my time playing guitar and I've come across a great guitar teacher called Justin Sandercoe who provides wonderful lessons for guitar playing from absolute beginner all the way up to pretty competent, all free online, or you can buy his courses if you wish. But in some of his materials I came across several months ago 10 great tips for learning to play the guitar, and the more I've thought about them, the more I've realised how pretty much they're really applicable to language learning as well. So just as a fun video, I'm going to go over his 10 tips for guitar playing and see how these relate to language learning. I've certainly benefited from them, so fingers crossed you will too. So let's go. So this is his name, Justin Sandercoe. I'll put a link in the video description. The first one, practice what you can't do, not what you can. We often get in a rut where certain things are too scary for us and we avoid them. And certain things we're comfortable with, we stick with them. I noticed myself I do this and many of the other mistakes actually in language learning. And I have to keep reminding myself that I'm stuck in doing the easy stuff and avoiding the hard stuff. And a great example of this is that I've noticed I very often ignore the conditional case. If I could do that, then I would do that, this kind of conditional stuff. And stick instead with trying to squeeze things into the present tense or the future tense and so on. And I really wanted to overcome this. And this is a constant reminder to me to focus on the things that you can't do. Practice those, because even though it's difficult at first, when they become easier, the whole language use becomes easier. So yes, keep practicing the things that you're really good at. That's lots of fun. But practice more on the things that you can't do. So those are the things you need to improve. Next one. Never practice making a mistake. Get it right. So I noticed, I've done this myself, that I keep repeating the same mistakes over and over again when I'm speaking, and I haven't been very good very often at relying on feedback to point out my mistakes so that I don't make them again. So try to get feedback from people, and if you notice you're making a mistake, deliberately avoid making it. There's no point ingraining the same mistake over and over and over again until it becomes habitual. Number 3, start slowly and get it right before you speed up. Very often we think that when people speak quickly, they're very good in a language, and when we struggle and speak slowly, we're going to look like idiots. But that isn't the case. If people understand your message, they don't really care that you're speaking slowly. And when you're first starting out, or even when you're at intermediate level, you do have to speak slowly sometimes as you're thinking about things. And it's better to speak slowly and deliberately than to rush through it and make lots of mistakes in panic, or even be too scared to say anything at all. Because what often seems like an eternity to you, oh, I'm feeling so slow now, isn't actually noticeable very often by somebody who's speaking a language. For example, now I'm going to say something that's quite slow, to be honest, in English, but I don't think it's really going to bother you that much. You see, to me that seemed to be taking an eternity, but it doesn't matter. Nobody will care. So get it right slowly, methodically, thinking things through, and no one's going to care if it takes a few seconds for you to get your message across. Then when you're comfortable, speed up. So, use a timer to save time. I've noticed this is very important for myself now. I used to just think, I'll spend an hour today approximately doing some language study, and I wouldn't be very precise about it. I'd get distracted if an email came in or somebody sent me a text message on my mobile phone, and by the end of the hour I'd think, well, I guess an hour's gone on the clock, but was I really focused on the work? And was it really an hour, or was it 45 minutes? If you actually set a specific timer of concentrated work without any distractions, say for 15 minutes, half an hour, whatever is suitable for you, then you'll know you've done half an hour of solid work, 15 minutes of solid work, and not be distracted by other things. So over time, these 15 minutes add up, and it's of solid work, not constant distraction and just feeling at the end, well, that must have been a lot of time. Okay? Focus on one element of practice at a time. Now, this is really hard in the beginning because you want to be good at everything. But once you pass the beginner's stage, I have learned, thank you to many great polyglots, that it's actually really beneficial in each session to focus on improving one thing, such as trying to improve the intonation with the language, or trying to improve your listening ability, being able to spot word boundaries without worrying about meaning, that type of thing. So really just focusing on one particular aspect that you know you've had trouble with really helps you to concentrate your efforts rather than trying to do everything at once. I found this to be really, really very beneficial. So, number 6. Try and practice a little bit every day rather than a lot on one day. We often want to be very heroic and do mammoth sessions, and we feel if I can only do 15 minutes, it's not worth doing it, but I'll be free at the weekend. A 2-hour session at the weekend of heroic effort might make you feel like you've worked hard, but by the next weekend you'll forget it, and it really is much more beneficial to do short amounts every day, or even several times a day. 10 minutes twice a day, 5 or 6 days a week, is much better than a 2-hour session at the weekend. Even if you just feel you're not doing much, it adds up. And the constant reminders to your brain, once or twice a day, keep things bubbling in your head. Whereas if you do it at the weekend, you'll have forgotten it a few days later. So, number 7, keep track of your practice and use a practice schedule. I must admit I'm often really bad at this, but on the times I do it, I have a little notebook and I write down what I've done each day, how much time I've done each day, and what I was doing specifically. And this log of my work, when I look back on it later on, I can see where I've made progress, where I haven't made progress, and stuff that I've avoided. And it gives you a real feeling of progress over time, and the recognition that you have put the effort in, and shows you areas for weakness to improve on. So I admit I'm not great at it myself, but the times I do it, I'm very grateful that I do. Now this is one which is specific to guitar. If it sounds good, it is good. So, but we can adapt it to language learning a little bit, which is saying, yes, all the theory is fine, all this talking academically about stuff is great, but what it ultimately comes down to is, if you are using the language, and you can understand the language, and you're having conversations, and you're having a nice time with it, that's what really matters. All the other stuff, really, is just to help that. It's just to support that. What really matters is, if you're able to use the language to communicate and able to help understand other people, that's really what matters. None of the other stuff really does. So, playing and practicing are very different, and don't confuse them. Okay, so I noticed myself, one of my many failings is that sometimes I get a little bit too caught up in doing study, looking at grammar tables, trying to analyze things, using a textbook, really studying the language, and at the end of it, not having actually recognized that this is just background for what really counts, which is speaking and listening and reading and writing. Conversely, there have been times when I've put the textbooks aside and thought, okay, I'm just going to watch cartoons now, or watch movies, or go down to the pub with friends and talk. And what I really think I was missing is a clear distinction between whether a time was playing with the language, just using the language, or studying the language. And if I've overemphasized one, I like to now remind myself that I need to balance it with the other. So just putting an hour into the language, you have to be clear about whether it's playtime, just having fun with the language, or study time. And the last one, this is great. The more you think, the more you stink. Practice until it's instinctive. One problem is if you approach a language like an academic subject, so you think, well, I know that now, but that's fine when you're writing tests because you've got thinking time. But what really is necessary when you're using a language in real life is automaticity, where you know it so deeply there's no thinking involved. I've made a video about this called Thinking in Another Language, which says really what we're searching for is not to be thinking at all. The language is so deep inside you now, it comes out automatically. The words just flow out, and when words go in, the meanings, you just know them. There's no thinking it through. So if you find you're having to still think things through, that just means you've got to keep practicing the same things until it becomes instinctive. And it does come in time. It does come so that words just come out and meaning just comes in and there's no thinking going on. So I'm going to leave it there. Just a fun video here that I noticed that 10 tips from Justin Sandercoe on guitar playing seem to actually have a lot of relevance to language learning. I certainly found that to be the case. Hope you did too. Thank you. Bye.